I'm Cameron Okeson. I'm an indie game dev and a 2D and 3D artist. I've been working on a game called It's a Game Changer, and I want to share my experiences and kind of journey in the development process of this game. Let's start with the general concept and explanation of the game. You play a bunch of different little micro games, and as you play, you can pick between 3 different power-ups, and each power-up comes with a positive effect and a negative effect, and you're trying to go as long as you can and score as many points as possible as you play this game. In one of the micro games, you play as an alien and you're trying to collect fuel rods for your crashed spaceship so you can leave this alien planet that you're on. In another one of the micro games, you play as a stray cat in the rain and you're trying not to get wet, so you're just kind of running back and forth trying to avoid the rain. In another one, you play as that same alien in the crashed spaceship level, and you've come across a species of plant aliens, and you're trying to kind of harvest and collect them for different uses. And so they'll spawn up, and they'll run around in different directions on this floating platform that you're on, and you just kind of got to grab as many as you can. There is also the classic fishing micro game. You play as technically the hook, but you play as a fisherman, and you're casting your rod, and you're trying to hook as many fish as you can on your way down and on your way back up. There's also a trying to avoid dropping your soup game. You're walking through a dining room, and you're holding a bowl of soup, and as you're walking, you kind of lose balance, and you're trying to maintain that balance and prevent your soup from hitting the ground. Just like classic Mario Party games, you are spamming a button to accomplish this task, and in this instance, you're cutting down this really big tree as a lumberman, and so you're hitting what I call the action button as fast as you can to chop down the tree. In this microgame, you are trying to pull a sword out of the stone, and you can wiggle it with your joystick or your arrow keys, and you hold your action button to actively pull it up. When you wiggle it, it moves faster. In this microgame, you are that alien again, and you found yourself on this really rickety rope bridge, and what you're trying to do is not fall as the planks of wood that make up the bridge are collapsing under the sway of the wind and under your weight, and so you're just trying to stay on that bridge for as long as you can. Now let me take you on this journey of development that I've been on. One of the main reasons I took up this project is I wanted to learn Godot. So I started playing with Godot at the beginning of the summer of 2023 because I'm a big proponent of open source programs and letting people have control and availability to these tools and resources and not just hiding them behind a paywall. So I really looked into it and I found Godot. And Godot was a really different way of approaching things. So I, in high school, grew up using Unity and playing around with them. And in college, I used Unity for a little bit, and then I switched to Unreal. And Unreal is a beast of its own. And so I wanted to try something new. And one of the biggest things that really let me want to learn Godot is the fact that it is not more than a gigabyte in size. I can do pretty much everything on just about any computer with Godot. So in this whole process of learning Godot, I was using one project and just kind of creating a bunch of little micro games to kind of figure out how best to use Godot. And what I ended up coming to a realization of was taking each of these micro games and kind of meshing them together in a roguelike, because I wanted to learn how to kind of do roguelike mechanics. So I started implementing a roguelike system and a level spawning system and kind of figuring out what tools are needed to create a roguelike, the power-up system, spawning in new levels, timers, and all that other fun stuff. One of the things that I knew before I started this project, but I was reminded on 2 different occasions, was to back up the project through something like Git, something that keeps a history of everything. The first time was I was trying to get Git set up on my wife's computer so I can kind of go back and forth between the 2 different computers, because having multiple monitors is really nice. And I didn't quite get it set up. I had local history set up, but that was it. And then because it wasn't set up on the cloud, I kind of forgot about it and kind of gave up and just used an external SSD. And then About 4 or 5 months later, I then accidentally deleted the whole project through an add-on on Godot. And so I panicked, but luckily I had that local history saved and I was able to restore back, and I only lost so many months of work, but it wasn't as bad as it could have been if I wasn't backing things up. And so now I am backing everything up on Git just to make sure that I can go on any computer and work on my game, or even just make sure if something gets deleted, I can always have access to it again. Something that has been probably the most difficult part of this whole project is finding a coherent way to combine many different genres of video games into one video game. Like running around picking up items in a 3D world and then jumping to a 2D world where you're having to spam your spacebar button, for example, and being able to clearly communicate what the player needs to do in every scenario has been really challenging, but it has been a fun little challenge. Now I want to talk about some really cool technical things that happened within my game. The first one is I love how much Godot handles the way of loading in levels and prefabs. So they are basically the same thing in Godot. And so instead of having a separate file for scenes and a separate file for prefabs, they're both the same. And what that allows me to do is essentially treat my levels as prefabs and load them in. It's just a really cool way of thinking about how level loading is handled in Godot. Speaking with our scenes, I've also been trying to minimize performance issues with loading in those scenes. I have cutting down and pulling out as much low poly stuff as I can, or really slamming down the LOD so it's automatically decimated so I don't have to worry about getting it even more low poly. I have also been using smaller textures instead of doing what a lot of AAA games with like 4K, 8K textures. I think the biggest one I have is 1024, which is 1K texture, but a lot of, if not most of them, are 512 by 512. So that's been helping with the loading. I have also been designing each level to make them as small as possible so I don't have to worry about going a little overboard on the visuals, but trying to create a good stylized view of something without going overboard on objects, textures, and primitives and shaders. I also did some good programming, some animations. I've done this in Unreal Engine, and Unreal Engine's really good, but it can get really complicated because they're trying to make life easier for artists, so there's a lot of checkboxes and nodes and different things to play with. Godot let me do a lot of similar things with like an animation tree and different things like that, but I can also enact those animations with my code so that I have a little more granular control over when my animations start and when they stop. But that also leads to different kind of issues where sometimes they don't work and I can't figure out why, or upon further inspection, I forgot something a little silly. Another really cool technical art thing that Godot does really well is they have a thing called a parallax node. With Godot, it is a true 2D engine, unlike if you were using Unity or Unreal, where they're 3D engines and they can kind of fake 2D. Godot uses a true 2D engine, so their approach to things are a little different. In Unity, to achieve a parallax effect, you just kind of move things closer to the camera or farther away from the camera and turn on perspective so that there's actual parallaxing going on. Where in Godot, you create a parallax node where it changes the size so it looks closer or farther from the camera, and then you can adjust the layering of the different images so that you can further achieve those perspective things. That's all I got for this video, guys. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch my video. If you have any more questions or concerns about my journey or how you can use the varying game engines, leave a comment down below. Wishlist my game on Steam. That really helps get it out there and shown in front of as many eyes as possible.